In this video, we're going to continue looking at nonmetals bonding together, two or more nonmetals bonding together, sharing electrons, forming molecular compounds, and we call those covalent bonds. The term co meaning sharing, and then valent, outer electrons, like co-captain or co-pilot, sharing the responsibilities, and valence meaning outer electrons. So you're sharing the outer electrons. This is very different than what we previously looked at with a metal and a non-metal atom, where we are transferring electrons. Now we have two nonmetals sharing electrons, making a molecular compound, the covalent bond. And now for the first time, we've used this term molecule. If we compare the ionic compound with the molecular compound, the ionic compound was an ionic crystal structure, a repeating pattern of positive and negative ions. The molecule that's created by two nonmetals is an individual unit. So it's a molecule, not a large ionic crystal structure. So we're looking at two nonmetals sharing electrons, forming what we call covalent bonds. The way that we know that it's a molecular compound is we looked at their difference in electronegativity. And their difference in electronegativity is much less. Notice it's a difference in electronegativity. You're comparing the two atoms and their value of attracting electrons. And because there's not much difference between them, they end up sharing electrons. If there's a big difference in their strength of attracting electrons, the one atom will take away the other atom's electrons. But here the difference is closer, so they're sharing. We found out that if the difference is a little bit higher, they unequally share the electrons. That means one of the atoms is a little bit stronger and it pulls them closer. Not strong enough to take the electrons away, just a little bit stronger to pull them closer. On the other hand, if the two atoms have similar or the same electronegativity values, then they are sharing equally, or equally sharing electrons. And this is that electronegativity chart. This is the same chart that's on the back side of your periodic table. In our notes, we're going to write, today is the topic, Lewis structures. And we're going to look and write this, some common bonding patterns. And some of the common bonding patterns that we're going to look at first is carbon. Carbon really likes to make 4 bonds and have 0 lone pairs. Now at the beginning of this lecture, it's going to be quite confusing, so I want you just to stay with me through the lecture. Do your best to pay attention, and then as we do examples, some of this terminology and wording will begin to make more sense. Carbon likes to make 4 bonds. In the previous video, I talked about a bond being drawn as a line. Now technically, this bond, this one line, really is equal to, so this bond is really equal to 2 electrons being shared. So we could have, instead of drawing a line, we could have drawn 2 electrons being shared, and then we would have had another atom listed here. So carbon likes to make 4 connections. Nitrogen, it likes to make 3 connections, 3 bonds, and then it likes to have a lone pair. Here's a lone pair. These are electrons. There's an electron. There's an electron. There's 2 electrons, so it's a pair, and they're by themselves, so it's a lone pair. Oxygen, on the other hand, likes to make two bonds, one bond and another bond, and two lone pair. Hydrogen and the halogens, remember the halogens are everybody in column 7A. So column 7A, what they like to do is make one bond and then have three lone pairs. If it's hydrogen, it only has two valence electrons, so there's not going to be any lone pairs. And then we'll look at BE and B shortly. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go through writing the Lewis structures for covalent molecules. So there are 5 steps, and we're going to place these 5 steps in our notebook, and we're going to, as we write these 5 steps, we're going to go through the examples on this worksheet. So we'll write down step 1 and then look at the example going through step 1, then step 2 and step 3, and we're going to be writing the Lewis structures in the next video.